All right, so you had this beautiful parallel trend line, this white line down here, matching perfectly with this one up here. Price came down to it. You got the technical bounce. And then look at this kind of head and shoulder pattern right here. You went right back to that neckline before starting to roll over again. Me, it's 20,000 is my high-end target for sure. I do think it can go a little bit lower. I agree with Stifled in terms of, you know, if you look at past corrections or bear markets in Bitcoin, it's an 80% drop. And if you take the 69,000 high and take away 80%, you're basically at 10,000. So I understand where they're coming from in terms of that. And I agree that, you know, we're in an unprecedented period that we haven't seen for 20, 30, 40 years, where inflation is now an issue and the governments around the globe are going to have to start taking away money from the system instead of pumping it in. And that's going to have an impact. I mean, I've looked at some of these stocks out there like Roblox and Roku. I mean, Roku's down from $500 a share to like $100 a share. I mean, that's a massive decline. And Bitcoin kind of is a risk on asset. So it's treated like a tech stock. So very likely you will see further downside. I'll start nibbling on a longer term entry for Bitcoin when it gets to 20, and then I'll just kind of keep buying all the way down. Oh, I mean, you know, last year it was going to be 100,000. This year now they're you know, trying to scrape it out and just throw it out there. I just don't see it. I mean, unless for some reason something happens where monetary supply all of a sudden starts to increase. That's the bull case for Bitcoin, the bull case for tech stocks. And at this point, all we see is worse headline inflation numbers, right? So, I mean, if all of a sudden inflation went back to 2% and we got into a recession, yeah, then I think that is a possibility. But I just do not see it, not with PPI numbers coming out recently near 10%. And just looking at the chart, Bitcoin's behaving very much like a chart should, all right? So you had this beautiful parallel trend line, this white line down here, matching perfectly with this one up here. Price came down to it. You got the technical bounce. And then look at this kind of head and shoulder pattern right here. You went right back to that neckline before starting to roll over again. So on a technical basis, there's 2 points I'm watching on the chart in the near term. This one right here, this orange one, if we break above it, you have potential for upside to 50 to 52,000, the midpoint. If you break below the white line, that's where you start heading down into the 20,000 range. You know, at first you'll have support at this low over here around 28,000, 29,000. But very quickly, I do think you could get down to the previous all-time high back in 2017, which is right around that 20,000 level. So, I mean, it's one of those things where if you're an investor in Bitcoin, you have to take a longer-term view if you're going to stick with it, because certainly what's going on in the macro economy, what's going on with inflation is just not bullish for crypto or Bitcoin. Yeah, so you know that I've called for the best performer between Bitcoin, the stock market, and gold to be gold in 2022. So far, so good, right? I mean, gold has had a beautiful breakout. In fact, let's jump into the chart on gold and take a quick look here. Let's see what we got. You can see again, we had this wedge pattern. In fact, I think last time I was on, we discussed this wedge pattern, and we have seen a breakout now. And again, that's coming with the unnerving kind of issues with Russia and Ukraine and all these other things. But it's also now you're seeing the pattern playing out. So you guys know I'm a big technician in terms of the charts, and I've talked about how this move up was 2 years. This consolidation is approaching 2 years, and it's bullish consolidation. Here's your breakout. And then the last thing, I love to show this chart. It's such an important chart for investors to understand. Go back to your 1970s to 1980s chart on gold. And what you can see here is that it's replicating exactly what we saw back in the 70s. So from like 72 to 74, you had the big move. That's the equivalent of 2018 to 2020. We then went into kind of a consolidation pattern for a couple years. And then this is what I think is now beginning on gold, this massive move up. Now, back then it was $100 to 900. I don't really expect that type of percentage move, but I do think, again, seeing a 3,000 handle on gold, you know, maybe even by year end is a possibility, and then maybe even 5,000 within a couple years on gold. So again, you know, gold to me is the safe play. I know a lot of people want Bitcoin to be that play where you kind of say, okay, you know, Bitcoin will protect us against inflation. It will in 5 or 10 years, I believe, not right now. Bitcoin is a risk asset. It's going to get treated like a risk asset until it gets more investors and calms down. Yeah, if you don't have any exposure at this point, I do think you put some in your portfolio. You know, maybe not crazy, 5-10% of your portfolio should be in the metals. You can spread it around a little bit too. I'm not as big a bull on silver, mainly because you have the industrial side where if the Fed does what I think they're going to do and raises interest rates multiple times this year, it's going to slow the economy. So then you have to worry about, you know, the demand for silver for industrial production and batteries of electric cars and so forth. But ultimately, spread it around, be exposed to metals. That's going to be your best way to protect yourself against inflation. Bitcoin gets sub 20,000. That's where I start to buy as a hedge. And I think it has a hugely upside. Yeah, 20,000, like, you know, and the way I invest is I always am humble enough because I've unfortunately learned my lessons in my early career the rough way by losing a ton of money. So what I do is I usually will put out an order at 20,000 or just sub 20,000, and then I'll do another one at 15 and another one at 12 and another one. You know, I don't go all in at one spot because I've learned my lesson that I've been wrong too many times, and it's better to kind of, you know, dollar cost average it. Wow. It's so hard. I understand I was one of you guys when I first started investing. I was one who was chasing momentum. Lucky for me, back when I started investing, there was no Twitter. Social media was just beginning, so I didn't get the kind of the pumping that you see on social media, which I think is a hugely harmful thing. But what I would say is use it as a learning experience. Remember, the charts give you kind of a non-biased view of what's going on. You never want to chase. I would say at this stage, I don't know if I would cut the investment. Instead, maybe just look to dollar cost average when you get down towards 20, and maybe over the course of time, you can really bring your average in. Yeah, so let's take a look at Ethereum here. We're going to go to the daily chart. And again, Ethereum, the charts are just telling us so much, right? So you can see this trend line cutting right through. You had this beautiful retrace, little dip, retrace again. And now in the short term, we've broken this little low right here, which is short-term bearish. So I do think Ethereum in the near term probably comes down and tests 2,300, 2,375 right down here. Then the question is, does it hold? And for me, I'll start watching this trend line here, which will be the next area of support. And then if it gets through that, this area here will be major support. Now, if Bitcoin goes to 20 or 10,000, then you have to assume, you know, Ethereum is headed back to probably sub 1,000 when that happens. So again, this is all contingent on Bitcoin kind of dumping out and the cryptos continuing to roll over. But if that does happen, then yeah, you're looking at, you know, probably being able to buy Ethereum at $750 again, which would be, for me, an awesome entry price. Yeah, you know, going back to 2017 and 2018, we did see the price of mining Bitcoin. You know, basically the price of Bitcoin got lower than the cost to mine it. At least that's what I was seeing back then. So in short periods, that can happen, and I think it does happen in this winter, if you will. But I think again that the longer term narrative of Bitcoin is only getting stronger. I mean, when you see Microsoft buying Activision Blizzard, when you see countries like El Salvador adopting it and other countries starting to adopt it more and more, it's just one more piece in the longer term puzzle for cryptocurrency to survive and thrive. So even though I'm bearish that you know, we're getting into this kind of environment where the Fed is going to crush assets, a lot of these risk assets, the longer term is super positive for things like Bitcoin. Yeah, so Cardano, right, this is a very interesting chart. So you have basically major support right here at this 98-cent level. And you can see again, all the way back into, you know, early 2021, it kept on hammering on this level. Now it's still holding that support. That is your key support. You do not want to see Cardano trading below that area down here. Now on the other side, if it breaks above this downsloping trend line, which connects the highs, then that would be a huge buy signal. Right now that line's around $1.24, $1.25. It will continue to slope lower. So what I'm doing here is I do have a little position in Cardano. It is very small, but if it broke out, I would add to that position aggressively. And then if it breaks down here, I would probably at that point cut it and stay on the sidelines until it gets to a major support, the next major support. So let's take a look at Polkadot here. Polkadot, I have a very small position on as well. I have this long-term trend line right here. You can see connecting the lows of December 2020 through the low of July 2021, and then it touched it right here. As long as this level holds, I think there's potential for some upside. I'm not going to go out on a limb and say this is going back to $30 or $40 in the near term, but as a swing trader, I think it could easily trade back north of $20 to $21, where, you know, from an entry at 18, that's actually a pretty nice near-term return. So I think near-term bullish as long as this trend line holds. So again, you know, think about it like this. A lot of these cryptocurrencies are holding very important technical levels. We saw the Bitcoin level, right? If we flip back to Bitcoin here, you know, this white line right down here, that is a very important level. We saw the Cardano line, we saw the Polkadot line. Crypto has to hold here. It has to make a stand. And if not, I think you get that next big wave, which again, probably takes us to 20,000 on Bitcoin.